to have your name out in the community when you're in private practice. You'll notice that the most important lawyers in town, the biggest fish, are the ones who are on community boards, who are leaders in the community, because the traits go together. But it's a way to have your name out there as a real leader in the community. Most of all, as both of the panelists have said, it feels great. Something I've learned in my legal career is that the kind of pro bono work I could do on the side wasn't enough for me, that I took jobs of increasing community service. So I went from law firm at Phelps Dunbar, which I adored, but to the U.S. Attorney's Office prosecuting, and now teaching at Tulane and running the domestic violence clinic, because I have a job where I get up every day and I can't wait to go to work because what I do is so valuable to so many people. That said, for those of you who are in private practice, and women need to be in private practice in positions of power and authority, and some of you want nothing more than to do securities transactional work or whatever it is you do, that having the ability to do it on the side, and for some of you, as was also said before, the last thing you want to do at the end of a long day of practicing law is to practice more law, to do it pro bono. But there are a lot of ways to be involved in the community as a leader, on boards, some of you may want to gut houses because that feels a lot more satisfying, and when it's done, and nobody can question it. It's not subjective opinion about it, and it feels good. All of that's available to you. I want to make a special pitch to you to be involved in law reform issues, though, because there are a lot of ways that our system is broken, and I think that you are ethically obligated as a lawyer to work to fix the legal system. And that's everything from being involved in the Bar Association, but also in much more subtle ways, that the ways that lawyers fix things are not just by impact litigation or suing somebody or appealing, although those things matter. They're also about getting the people with power in the room and sitting them down and saying, so I've noticed that this is broken. Can we go about fixing it? Can we write a grant? Can we do something about it? You've seen so much more of that kind of activity post-Katrina in a way that's doable now. People getting involved from outside the criminal justice system to try to fix it. That's something available to you all. Understanding that there are core institutions within the fact that a bunch of women primarily got together and combined to one assessor and one levy board. All of that seemed an astonishingly difficult task because it was embedded in the state constitution, but it got done. So laws can be changed. Legislators are often open to ideas of how to change those laws. And for me, in the work that I'm now doing, I got politically involved as a teenager because I used to read obsessively about the civil rights movement. And I thought it was the saddest thing imaginable that I wasn't alive in the 60s to go march and sit in and risk my life and have my parents mad at me because I wanted to go do this work. And it just seemed so incredibly amazing to really be put to the test of whether you put your life on the line, of whether you would have that kind of courage. And I thought, well, I'll never know because nothing that exciting will ever come up again. Well, come to find out that there is this invisible issue all around you that is that important, that is that stark, that does involve people dying every day, and that's domestic violence. And particularly for a group of women, and I recognize faces in this audience that may be very daunted to speak to you, very powerful, impressive women. There are some women in this room who have been afraid for their lives, I promise you. There are some women in this room who have gone through this. There are 1,300 women every year in the U.S. who are murdered by husbands or partners. And so when we look at Afghanistan and see women being stoned, and we look at India where women are lit on fire, actually it happens every day in much more prosaic ways around here as well. You don't have to go that far, as I tell my students, to practice international women's human rights law. You can do it right here. And that's something available to each of you in terms of whether you do take on pro bono cases, but also whether you pay attention to when you're in a state court and you're waiting for your case to be called up, how the judge treats family law cases, how they treat protective order cases, because there's some things that are fundamentally broken in our system. And when I see lots of, while we're representing our clients, or women who are there pro se to get a protective order who get turned down because they can't articulate it well enough, because the judge isn't asking the right questions of them, because the judge maybe says, oh, well, you say that he held a gun to your head and kidnapped you and raped you 50 times, but he says he didn't do it, so I'm not going to grant the protective order. There's a lot of that work available where the stakes are life and death, and it couldn't be more important, and it matters to the lives of women, not just poor women, not just women on the fringes, but to women you know, who are friends and neighbors down the street who've never admitted this to you. So that's the kind of work that can matter enormously to your career. It can have all sorts of residual benefits to you professionally. The good news is this doesn't always involve that much sacrifice ultimately. It's embarrassing sometimes how much credit you can get even when you're not asking for it or claiming it. It means meeting people, it means being a leader in the community, being involved. Knowing more people is always good for you. Most of all, it just makes you feel great.
Tanya, I'm going to ask you to address, to sort of continue on that train of thought. I think that women have sort of a unique perspective when it comes to certain issues involving the community, involving the legal profession, and I'd like you to address the importance of diversity in bar associations as well as in community organizations.
So a lot of this involves kind of how much we think as women and also members of other minority groups. We are still experiencing discrimination that requires an overt attempt to get involved, to have positions of power within the bar, to collect together, to join the AWA or Marquette Society. And I've found this to be, I mean, first of all, let me ask you in the audience, how many of you have felt discriminated against professionally because of race or gender? Okay, so most of you, not all. There are lots of, right, and the kinds of discrimination that we feel as women, which I'll talk about first, are twofold, I think. One of the things that are more obvious that we talk about, work-family conflicts, whether mothers are treated differently as parents and employees than fathers are, sexual harassment, being hit on by judges or partners, not having the partner be willing to take a trip with you because it might make their wife jealous, whatever it is that you faced in your career. The flip side of that, as a couple of people talked about in the last panel, is at home. There are lots of studies to show that the only time men and women do equal amounts of work in the home that are all equivalent or close to that is when the man is staying home and not working. Then it evens out. Even if she works full-time, she then does only as much work as he does being home with the kids. When both of them are working, it's an astonishing disparity. And so a lot of the battle in terms of work conflict is in the home and how we socialize, how you raise your sons, how we train men that, you know, it's not just you have to ask your husband politely to do the work. You shouldn't have to ask, right? And these kind of low-level battles of resentment that where you're forced to nag and bother to get somebody to do half the work. What studies show is that when women get married, their workload at home goes skyrockets. When men get married, it drops because they suddenly have someone taking care of them. It's a great deal, right? I mean, wouldn't we all want a wife? But since we're not actually servants, to fight those battles at home becomes a big issue too, and I think there are lots of ways that talking to each other and connecting about that really matter. I had an interesting experience where I helped the Women's Law Students Association at Tulane put together a panel on women in the profession, and I helped them pick an incredible array of women who were really, really powerhouse, different careers, and I knew that each of them had experienced discrimination in the workplace. One of them had worked in a maritime section as the only young female associate. I mean, you can only imagine. And they had each, I knew stories individually that they had, and they got up there and the law students asked them, so tell us about what it is to be a woman as a lawyer, and they said, there is no discrimination. I have never experienced any discrimination. They looked at those students and they lied to them. And I think it's a combination of denial of us wanting to believe that these things aren't true, so we don't see it because it's just easier not to see it. But and also not wanting for young women coming up to think that they can't accomplish something or that there are going to be obstacles they can't overcome. But you're not doing them any favors by lying to them. You're just not. Because the reality is that there is plenty of evidence, and you all, most of you have experienced it, that it still matters enormously, that there's a huge power differential. I see this in my work because that power differential results in the beating, rape, and murder of women. You see it in the workplace in much more subtle ways, but it is there. And so that kind of mentoring young women of not, and And particularly not having the attitude that sometimes happens of thinking, you had it so much harder because you did, if you were an older woman. And so these young women today are whining and complaining because they don't even nearly know what